don't you understand? I told you, you have to leave right now.
But how can I go alone?
The airport was humming with the dull chaos of departures. Rolling suitcases, clipped heels on polished tile, the muted rumble of boarding calls. For most people, it was the sound of transition, of anticipation. For Amelia, it was the sound of survival. Her swollen feet ached with every step, the weight of 8 months of pregnancy pressing on her like a lead anchor. She pressed one hand against her lower back, trying to ease the tension, and with the other clutched her boarding pass. Adrian, walking 3 strides ahead, didn't notice. Or worse, he noticed and didn't care. His tailored navy suit cut a sharp line against the crowd, his leather briefcase swinging like a trophy. Heads turned. People always noticed Adrian. He had the posture of a man who owned the ground he walked on. Amelia, trailing behind, looked like his shadow. "Adrian," she called softly, almost breathless. "Can we slow down? I need a moment." He stopped abruptly, spinning on his heel. His voice came low but sharp enough to slice through. The din. "God, Amelia. Must you waddle like that in public? People are staring." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She froze, suddenly hyper-aware of the curious eyes drifting toward them. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the strap of her bag. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, the word catching in her throat like an apology. Adrian leaned in, his smile, polished for onlookers, but his whisper dripped venom. "Pregnant, not crippled. Don't make such a spectacle. Do you think investors want to see their CEO dragging dead weight around?" Dead weight. The phrase hollowed her chest. The memory of their wedding flashed in her mind, his promises of forever, his whispered vow that he loved her for her kindness, not her wealth. She had believed him so much so that she had hidden her billionaire lineage, determined to be valued for her heart. Now, she felt like a pawn he regretted acquiring. She tried to swallow the hurt, to keep moving. But Adrian wasn't. "Done. Look at yourself, Amelia." He gestured with a subtle flick as if displaying her body to the crowd. "Bloated, puffy, you've let yourself go. No wonder people are staring. They can't believe someone like me settled for someone like this." The humiliation was searing. Her breath caught, eyes stinging as the murmurs of passers-by became louder in her head. She wanted to shrink into the floor, disappear into the polished tile. But then a voice rang out. Clear, steady, commanding. "Enough." The crowd stilled, turning as one. A pilot in crisp uniform had stepped forward, his stride decisive. His cap shadowed his face until he drew closer, eyes locking on Amelia. Her heart lurched. Nathan, her brother. She hadn't seen him in years. They had parted bitterly when she chose love over family fortune, defying her father's warnings about Adrian. Nathan had begged her not to marry him. She had chosen Adrian anyway. And now here he was standing between them. Adrian straightened, his arrogance reflexive. "Excuse me? This is a private matter." "Not anymore," Nathan said, his voice steady as steel. "You don't speak to her that way. Not in front of me, not in front of anyone." Amelia's lips parted, words failing her. Nathan turned, softening only for her. "Sister," he said, the word carrying both weight and tenderness. The single syllable detonated in the air. Passengers gasped audibly. Amelia's pulse thundered, Adrian's jaw slackened. "Sister?" His voice cracked with disbelief, his confidence punctured for the first time in years. "Yes," Nathan said, stepping closer, his presence towering. "Amelia, my sister. Did you think she was alone in this world?" Amelia's knees weakened, tears pooling as her brother's words wrapped around her like armor. After years of isolation, control, and silence, someone was standing up for her. Adrian staggered, trying to recover. He forced a laugh brittle as glass. "Wait, you're telling me you're her brother? The Nathan Wexler, CEO of Wexler Aviation, the one Forbes calls untouchable?" Nathan's eyes never left his. The same. The airport felt suspended, air thick with revelation. Strangers had stopped walking, phones angled discreetly, recording. Adrian's empire of image was crumbling before Amelia's eyes, and for the first time she didn't feel small. Adrian turned on her, panic flickering beneath his rage. You never told me." Her voice trembled, but the truth carried, strength she hadn't realized she still had. "Because I wanted to be loved, Adrian. For me. Not for my family's money. Not for the Wexler name. But you've shown me exactly why I hid it. You never loved me. You loved control." The words hung between them like a verdict. Adrian's face flushed, but his voice dropped to a hiss. "You've ruined me." "No," Amelia said, straightening, one hand instinctively protecting the swell of her stomach. "You did that yourself." Nathan's hand touched her shoulder, grounding her. "Come with me, Amelia. You don't need to walk behind him anymore." Her vision blurred with tears, but for once they weren't from humiliation. They were from the slow, steady bloom of something she thought she had lost. Dignity. Adrian reached for her arm, desperate. "Amelia, wait, don't walk away." For years she had obeyed. This time she pulled back. The crowd seemed to part as Nathan guided her forward, each step echoing like liberation. Behind them, Adrian's voice cracked through the terminal. Half plea, half threat, but no one turned back. Phones recorded, strangers whispered. Headlines were already writing themselves, and Amelia, for the first time in years, felt the weight of her unborn child shift. Not like a burden, but like a promise. The hotel room was quiet except for the faint hum of city traffic below. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on her swollen stomach, the other gripping the memory of what had just happened. "Sister?" Nathan's voice replayed in her head like an echo she couldn't escape. The word felt like sunlight, after years of living underground. And yet it also ripped open old wounds. She hadn't spoken his name in so long. Nathan, her brother, her protector, the only person who had ever known the whole truth. Amelia closed her eyes and the present dissolved into memory. Flashback. 15 years ago. The Wexler estate was a kingdom of glass walls and marble floors, its vast corridors lined with oil portraits of stern ancestors. Amelia used to run barefoot through those halls, her laughter bouncing against cold stone. Nathan, always 2 steps ahead, would grab her hand and whisper, "Don't let them catch us. Not father, not anyone." Their father, Richard Wexler, commanded a presence like a storm, sharp, unpredictable, dangerous to defy. At the head of Wexler Holdings, he was a man people feared, a man whose children were expected to obey, not dream. But Nathan had been Amelia's shield. He was 3 years older, already carrying himself like a man when he was barely out of boyhood. Whenever their father raised his voice, Nathan stood in front of her. Whenever Amelia cried at night, Nathan slipped into her room whispering stories of escape. "You'll have a choice one day, Amy," he told her once, sitting under the sprawling oak in their garden. "You don't have to live by father's rules. You'll find someone who sees you, not the Wexler fortune." Her young heart clung to those words like scripture. Flashback. 8 years ago, Amelia was 23 when she met Adrian. It was at a charity gala, ironically hosted by her own family's foundation. She had dressed simply that night, choosing a navy gown instead of diamonds, determined to move through the room like anyone else. And then he appeared, Adrian Blackwell. Sharp jaw, confident smile, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. He wasn't born into wealth, but he moved among it like a predator disguised as prey. "You don't look like you belong here," he had said, standing beside her at the bar. Amelia remembered how her heart skipped. Someone who saw past the name, past the glitter. Someone who thought she was ordinary. She smiled, sipping her drink. "Maybe I don't." He laughed, leaning closer. "Good. Neither do I." It felt like fate. It felt like love. When Adrian proposed a year later, she didn't hesitate. Against Nathan's warnings, against her father's fury, she chose Adrian. She hid the Wexler name, hid the billions, hid the bloodline. She thought love didn't need inheritance to survive. Back in the present, Amelia let out a shuddering breath. How wrong she had been. Adrian hadn't wanted her. He had wanted control, and she had handed it to him, ribbon-wrapped. Flashback. 2 years ago. The cruelty had started quietly. Small barbs disguised as jokes. Don't eat that, Amelia. You'll lose your figure. Or, you really don't understand business, do you? That's why you need me. At first she brushed it off, convinced love meant patience. Convinced all couples stumbled. But then came the isolation. Adrian insisted she close her personal bank account. He called it streamlining. He dismissed her friendships as distracting. When she mentioned visiting Nathan, Adrian sneered. Your brother's just jealous. He'll never have what we have. The final wedge came the night she told him she was pregnant. Instead of joy, Adrian's first words were, "Do you realize how inconvenient this is right now?" She had smiled through tears, telling herself it was stress, not malice. But the truth was obvious. Adrian didn't see a wife or a mother-to-be. He saw an asset he could exploit and discard when it suited him. Back in the dim hotel room, Amelia pressed her forehead into her palms. The silence was deafening, and then came the knock. Firm, familiar. Her breath hitched. Amelia. Nathan's voice. She hesitated, torn between shame and longing, but the door opened anyway. Nathan stepped inside, still in his pilot's uniform, cap in hand. His eyes softened when they fell on her. You're safe now, he said quietly. Amelia's lip trembled. I don't deserve your help. He frowned. Don't you dare say that. You warned me, Nathan. You begged me not to marry him. And I didn't listen. Nathan stepped closer, kneeling in front of her, his hands firm on hers. You believed in love. That doesn't make you weak. It makes him a monster for exploiting it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I kept silent for so long. Every insult, every bruise on my pride, I let him. I thought if I endured it, if I loved hard enough, he'd change. And did he? Nathan asked gently. She shook her head, sobbing. Then, it's time to stop being silent, Nathan said, his voice sharp with conviction. You're not just my sister, you're Amelia Wexler. You have more strength than you've ever allowed yourself to remember. The name hit her like a spark. Wexler, a name she had buried, disowned, abandoned for the illusion of love. But Nathan's voice made it sound like a crown, not a curse. She wiped her eyes, her breath shaky but steadier. I don't even know who I am anymore. Nathan rose, standing, tall, his shadow stretching across the room. You're someone who survived. And now, you're a mother. You don't fight for yourself anymore. You fight for your child. And that makes you unstoppable. Amelia pressed her hand to her stomach. A kick, a reminder, a promise. Her silence had given Adrian power, but maybe her voice could take it back. The city outside pulsed with neon light, alive with movement. Amelia stood by the window, Nathan at her side. She looked at her reflection in the glass. The tired eyes, the swollen belly. The woman she barely recognized. And for the first time, she didn't just see weakness. She saw fire, faint but real, flickering in the dark. The heiress she had buried was stirring. The drive home was silent. Adrian's silence wasn't peace, it was punishment. He sat rigid in the driver's seat, his jaw locked, his eyes fixed on the road. Amelia sat beside him, her swollen belly pressed against the seatbelt, hands resting over the child inside her. Every second of silence screamed louder than his insults at the airport. The whispers of strangers, the sting of humiliation, the sharp, cutting word, dead weight. The baby shifted inside her as if echoing her unease. She pressed her hand to her stomach, whispering inside her mind, Don't listen. Don't absorb this poison. I'll shield you. I swear I will. When they pulled into the driveway, Adrian didn't wait for her. He slammed the car door, his footsteps striking the pavement like gunshots. Amelia lingered, her fingers trembling against the door handle. By the time she made it, inside Adrian had already poured himself a drink. The clink of ice cubes echoed through the living room. "You embarrassed me today," he said without turning around. His tone was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that made her skin crawl. Amelia's throat tightened. "You humiliated me in front of strangers. Adrian, I? He turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "You think this is about you? I have investors watching me like hawks. I have press in every corner. Do you know what it looks like when my wife waddles behind me like some charity case?" Her chest tightened. "I'm carrying our child." "Our child?" His laugh was bitter. "That child is already costing me more than it's worth. I missed a deal today because of your little stunt at the airport. Do you think anyone's going to take me seriously? If they see me tethered to this?" His hand gestured at her body, dismissive, cruel. Amelia's vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to shatter glass, to claw her way out of his grip. But she swallowed it. For now, because she saw something else in his eyes tonight. Something darker. Fear. Not fear of her, but of exposure. He had glimpsed Nathan, had heard the word sister, and it rattled him, and that gave her leverage. That night, lying in bed beside the man she no longer recognized, Amelia stared at the ceiling. Her body ached, her heart throbbed, her mind swirled. How did I get here? She had once been Amelia Wexler, the girl who ran barefoot through marble halls, the woman who believed in love over money, the sister who had promised Nathan she would never let anyone break her. And yet here she was, broken in pieces, hiding in plain sight. Tears slid silently down her temples. She bit her lip, muffling the sound, afraid Adrian would hear weakness and weaponize it. But in the dark, a vow began to take shape. No more silence, no more bending. If I cannot fight for myself, I will fight for this child. She pressed her hand against the swell of her stomach, whispering into the night, "You will not grow up watching me shrink, I promise you that." Weeks later, the baby arrived in a storm of pain and blood. The hospital room was sterile, buzzing with fluorescent lights, but Amelia felt utterly alone. Adrian wasn't there. He was closing a deal in Dubai, as if contracts mattered more than contractions. Hours passed in agony, nurses rushing in and out, monitors beeping. Amelia's body trembled, drenched in sweat. She screamed, prayed, cursed, begged, but through it all she clung to the thought of her child. When the baby's cry finally pierced the room, it was the most beautiful, shattering sound she had ever heard. They placed the tiny body on her chest, slick and warm, and tears spilled freely. "Hello," she whispered, pressing her lips to the damp forehead. "It's you and me now. Always." Adrian arrived the next day. He strolled into the hospital room wearing sunglasses, irritation etched on his face. "Do you know how embarrassing it is that I missed the gala because of this?" Amelia cradled the baby tighter. Fury ignited in her chest. "This is your child." He sighed, as if she had handed him an invoice instead of life. "Yes, well, I suppose we'll have to make do." Something inside her cracked, not the fragile kind of crack that breaks. It was the kind that opens, that makes room for something new. Resolve. Weeks at home motherhood was both salvation and suffering. Nights blurred into days. Amelia pacing the nursery floor with the baby in her arms, humming lullabies through exhaustion. She lived on little food, little sleep, little hope, and yet every smile, every tiny grasp of her finger reminded her what was at stake. Adrian, meanwhile, became more absent, more cruel. His empire demanded appearances, and Amelia became invisible. Bills stacked on the counter. He refused to let her access her own accounts, insisting he handled the finances. She knew better now. Control wasn't love. Control was prison. One night, sitting by the crib, she whispered aloud, He's kept me weak because he's afraid of me, afraid of who I am, afraid of what I could do if I remembered. Her voice trembled, but the fire burned brighter. The next morning, Nathan appeared at her door. She hadn't called him, but somehow he knew. He always knew. He looked at her, pale, exhausted, but holding her baby with fierce tenderness, and his jaw tightened. "He's destroying you, Amelia. I can't stand by and watch." She shook her head. "Not yet." "Not yet?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "How much more can you endure? He's bleeding you dry." Her gaze hardened, steady. "I'm not enduring. I'm learning. I've spent years playing small. He thinks he's won. Let him. Because when I strike, Nathan, it won't just be to leave, it'll be to end him." Nathan's eyes searched hers, seeing something he hadn't in years. Steel. He nodded slowly. "You sound like father," he said softly. Her stomach twisted, but her voice was firm. "No. I sound like a mother." She pressed her cheek against, her baby's soft head inhaling the scent of new life. For the first time in years, she felt power stirring inside her, not borrowed, not hidden. Her own. The house was quiet again after Nathan left, but Amelia no longer felt suffocated by silence. The insults still echoed. The loneliness still ached. But underneath it all, something had shifted. A mother's breaking point wasn't weakness. It was the birth of strength, and Adrian had no idea what was coming. The first headline appeared 3 days after the airport incident. Blackwell CEO snaps at pregnant wife. Witnesses stunned. Adrian had dismissed it as gossip when he tossed the paper aside. Tabloids, nothing more, they'll move on tomorrow. But by the end of the week, it wasn't just tabloids. It was the business journals, the glossy magazines, the investor blogs. Everyone wanted to know why Adrian Blackwell, the polished visionary of Blackwell Industries, had publicly humiliated his wife, and worse, why a pilot had stepped in to defend her. The word sister hovered in every article, unanswered, tantalizing. Amelia read them all in silence, her baby resting in her lap, the screen glow reflecting off her tired eyes. Every cruel headline felt like vindication. Every whisper of Adrian's unraveling was a reminder. His empire wasn't built on stone, it was built on glass, and she had just seen the first crack. At home, Adrian tried to maintain his performance. He adjusted his tie before the mirror, his reflection flawless as ever. "They're jealous," he said, more to himself than to her. "They hate that I climbed where they couldn't. They'll always try to drag me down." Amelia sat at the vanity behind him, brushing her hair with deliberate strokes. Her silence was sharp enough to cut. Adrian turned, irritation flaring. "Don't look at me like that." "I didn't say anything," she replied, her voice even. "That's worse," he snapped. "Your silence screams judgment." She met, his gaze in the mirror, her face a mask of serenity. Inside, her thoughts churned. Let him believe I'm meek. Let him underestimate me. It's the only way he'll never see me coming. That night, when Adrian stormed off to his study, Amelia pulled out the small leather-bound notebook she kept hidden beneath the crib mattress. Every insult, every missed bill, every bruise, emotional, financial, psychological, she documented it all with meticulous detail. Dates, times, exact words. The airport incident had been public, but most of Adrian's cruelty lived in the shadows of their home. Amelia was determined to drag those shadows into the light, one page at a time. She glanced at her sleeping child. "Someday, when you're old enough to ask why I stayed, I'll show you this. Not to excuse myself, but to prove I was fighting even in silence." Weeks later, the cracks widened. An investor dinner turned sour when Adrian lost his temper over a minor disagreement about quarterly returns. His voice, usually honeyed and commanding, sharpened into anger. Amelia watched from her seat, her hand lightly circling the stem of her wineglass. Across the table, an investor leaned toward another, whispering just loud enough. "He's unstable. I've heard stories." Adrian noticed. His laugh rang out. Too forced, too loud. He glanced at Amelia, signaling her with a glare to smile, to play the perfect wife. She obeyed. She smiled. She leaned in when he spoke. She laughed at the right beats. But her eyes were cold glass. Inside, she was memorizing every detail. When the dinner ended, Adrian gripped her wrist in the car. You didn't try hard enough. They weren't charmed. Her pulse raced under his grip, but her voice was soft. I'll do better. Submission. Masked rebellion. The performance of a lifetime. At night, she called Nathan. He's slipping. She whispered into the phone, her voice barely audible above the baby's breathing. Nathan exhaled heavily. You need to get out before he drags you under with him. I can't, not yet. Why? Because leaving now would make me look weak. Everyone still thinks I'm the victim in his story. I need them to see the truth, that he's the parasite. And for that, I need evidence. Enough to destroy him. There was silence on the line, then Nathan's low, steady voice. I hate that you sound like father. Her throat tightened. This isn't father's power hunger. This is survival. Days bled into nights. Adrian's public mask grew thinner, his temper shorter. At home, he raged about investors, about headlines, about whispers in boardrooms. But in public, he still played the golden boy, smiling, shaking hands, promising innovation. The duality was exhausting to watch. Amelia wondered if he even realized how transparent he had become. One evening, she stood in the nursery, rocking the baby while Adrian shouted on a conference call in the next room. His voice was booming, venomous. The baby stirred at the sound, crying softly. Amelia hushed them, whispering, Don't worry, little one. Monsters always roar loudest before they fall. Her first act of quiet rebellion came small but significant. She installed a voice recorder in Adrian's study. Tucked beneath the leather couch, it captured everything. His late-night tirades, his panicked phone calls, his curses about useless investors and that fat burden of a wife. She listened back in secret, each recording more damning than the last. Each file stored safely on a drive Nathan helped her encrypt. The more Adrian revealed himself behind closed doors, the more Amelia's confidence grew. She was no longer just enduring. She was archiving his downfall. The final crack came at a charity gala. Adrian worked the room, shaking hands with senators, laughing with journalists. His charm was flawless, until one guest brought up the airport scandal. So Adrian, the man said lightly, glass in hand, tell us, how does it feel being brother-in-law to the Wexler dynasty? The question hung like smoke. Adrian froze. His smile flickered just for a moment. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Amelia caught the ripple of unease pass through the crowd. Whispers started, spreading like fire. Adrian excused himself, abruptly pulling Amelia aside with a vice grip on her arm. You planned this, he hissed. She met his fury with cool eyes. I smiled. I played my part. Isn't that what you wanted? He shoved her away, breath ragged. If you ever try to make me look weak again, you'll regret it. Amelia adjusted her dress, composed her face, and stepped back into the gala as though nothing had happened. But inside, she was smiling. Because for the first time, Adrian wasn't just cracking. He was crumbling. That night, as she tucked her baby into the crib, Amelia whispered softly, He thinks I'm still afraid. He thinks I'm still his shadow. But I'm not. I'm the storm that's coming for him. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell, peaceful, unaware of the war their mother was waging. Amelia kissed the child's forehead and turned off the light. Her silence was no longer submission. It was strategy, and Adrian had no idea that the wife he dismissed as dead weight was about to become the weight that sank him. The first contraction ripped through her body like a knife. Amelia doubled over, clutching her stomach, a guttural cry, escaping her lips. Adrian, she gasped, reaching for him across the living room. He was on the phone, pacing, his Bluetooth earpiece glowing blue in the dark. He glanced at her, annoyed, not alarmed. Not now, Amelia. I'm closing Singapore. Her knees buckled. The pain was relentless, wave after wave, tearing her insides apart. She grabbed the edge of the sofa, voice trembling. "The baby's coming." Adrian sighed as though she'd spilled wine on the carpet. "Of course it is. You couldn't wait another week, could you?" "I need to go to the hospital," she pleaded, sweat slicking her brow. "Then call a car," he snapped, already turning back to his call. "I can't leave mid-deal. Do you understand what's on the line here?" The betrayal landed heavier than the contraction. He wasn't coming. By the time the driver rushed her through hospital doors, Amelia was half conscious, her body racked with pain. Nurses swarmed, voices urgent. "She's crowning. Get her to delivery now." Fluorescent light streaked above her as the gurney wheeled down the corridor. Amelia's fingers clawed at the sheets, searching for something, someone to hold on to. But there was no one. No Adrian. In the sterile delivery room, agony consumed her. She screamed until her throat burned, until her voice became raw silence. The doctor's commands blurred together. "Push, Amelia, push!" But her body felt like it was tearing apart. "I can't," she thought. "I'm too weak. I can't do this alone." Then a smaller voice inside her whispered, "Yes, you can. Because you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for your child." She pushed again and again. Each scream was a war cry. Blood, pain, the threat of slipping under, and then, finally, life. A tiny wail split the air, high and piercing. They placed the child on her chest, wet and warm, heartbeat fast against her own. Amelia sobbed, clutching the newborn with trembling arms. "You're here. You're safe." I didn't let go. But her body gave way. The room tilted. Darkness crept at the edges of her vision. "She's hemorrhaging," a nurse shouted. The monitor beeped erratically. Amelia's breath came in shallow gasps. She saw the doctor's face blur, heard the rush of feet, the clatter of instruments. "Is this how it ends?" she thought weakly. "Do I leave you alone before we even begin?" Her hand clung tighter to her child. She forced her voice through the choking dark. "No, not like this. Not tonight." The world went black. When she opened her eyes, it was dawn. Pale light filtered through the blinds. Her body felt hollow, stitched together with pain. And then, soft crying. She turned her head. A nurse was rocking the baby beside her. "She's strong," the nurse whispered, placing the child back into Amelia's arms. Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks as she pressed her lips to her daughter's head. "We survived," she whispered hoarsely. "We're alive. That's all that matters." The door creaked open. "Amelia." Her brother's voice. Nathan stood there, still in his pilot's uniform, eyes red with guilt. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling beside the bed. "I wasn't here," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have been. I promised I'd protect you." Amelia shook her head, tears spilling. "You came. That's enough." Nathan brushed the baby's cheek with a trembling hand. "She looks like you. She looks like hope," Amelia said softly, holding her child tighter. Nathan's jaw hardened. "Adrian wasn't here, was he?" She looked away, shame and rage twisting inside her. Nathan's silence was volcanic, his fists clenched. "He'll answer for this, I swear it." Amelia touched his hand, her grip weak but firm. "Not yet. Let him think he's untouchable. That's when I'll strike." Adrian arrived that evening, the scent of expensive cologne preceding him. He strolled into the hospital room carrying a bouquet, his smile rehearsed. "My darling," he said smoothly, as though nothing had happened. "You did wonderfully. Look at her, she's perfect." Amelia's body recoiled, the audacity, the hollowness in his tone. "You weren't here," she whispered. He set the flowers on the table with a casual shrug. "Business doesn't pause for biology. I knew you'd manage." Her eyes burned. "I nearly died." For a flicker, his facade cracked. Panic flashed across his face, quickly buried. He forced a laugh. Don't be dramatic. The doctors had it under control. And besides, think of what matters, our future, our family, our future, our family. She almost laughed at the hypocrisy. He wasn't worried about her life. He was worried about her name. Amelia saw it now, clear as crystal. The only thing tethering Adrian to her was the Wexler bloodline. Not love, not loyalty, but leverage. Her resentment deepened, silent and sharp. She turned to the child, kissing her forehead. "She's mine," Amelia whispered. Adrian chuckled, mistaking her defiance for sentiment. "Ours, my love. Ours." But Amelia's eyes told a different truth. That night, when the room was quiet and the baby finally asleep, Amelia stared at the ceiling. Her body still ached from battle, her stitches pulling with every breath. But inside her chest, something new was rising, resolve. She thought of the blood on the hospital sheets, the doctor shouting she might not make it. She thought of Adrian's absence, his bouquet, his empty words. He had abandoned her when she was weakest. He had revealed the truth. He saw her as expendable, and, in that revelation, he had created his own downfall. Amelia turned her head to watch her baby sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now, I'll save you." Her resentment hardened into something colder, sharper, not escape, not surrender, revenge. Amelia no longer trembled when Adrian raised his voice. She no longer flinched when his footsteps echoed down the hall. Motherhood had carved something out of her, something raw and indestructible. The night she nearly bled to death had changed her. The soft, obedient wife Adrian once paraded at galas was gone. In her place stood a woman with iron in her veins and a daughter in her arms. And now, it was Adrian who had reason to be afraid. The first move was silence. She let him believe she was beaten. In the weeks after the birth, Amelia played her role perfectly, quiet, deferential, exhausted. When he snapped at her, she lowered her eyes. When he demanded gratitude for his sacrifices, she nodded. But while she nursed her child in the early hours, she was also nursing her plan. Amelia started with the investors. Not directly, never directly. That would have tipped her hand. Too soon. Instead, she made subtle calls through Nathan, leveraging the Wexler family name she had once hidden. Quiet meetings in dim hotel lounges. Phone calls conducted under the hum of static. She never mentioned Adrian outright. She simply expressed concerns, and in the corporate world, concerns whispered by a Wexler carried the weight of prophecy. "Are you sure Adrian is stable?" she murmured one evening into the receiver, her baby asleep in the bassinet beside her. "I only ask because, well, you've heard about the incident at the airport, haven't you?" A pause, then the eager agreement of someone already suspicious. She didn't need to push harder. Seeds, once planted, had their own way of growing. The Miai second move was the video. Someone, Amelia would never say who, leaked the airport footage to the press. It spread like wildfire across social media. Adrian's cruel laughter, his dismissive sneer. The way he called his heavily pregnant wife a burden in front of strangers. The comments were brutal. How can this man lead a company when he can't even respect his wife? Disgusting. Fire him. If that were my sister, I'd break his jaw. Adrian's carefully constructed mask of charisma shattered in an instant. No polished press release could undo the raw, unfiltered truth of his words. At home, he raged. "Do you realize what they're saying about me?" Adrian slammed his phone against the marble countertop, his face twisted with fury. "My board is calling emergency meetings, investors are pulling out, all because of one stupid video." Amelia sat across the room, rocking the baby, her expression unreadable. "Maybe they're just seeing the real you," his eyes snapped. To her, for a moment pure panic flickered there. He crossed the room in 2 strides, gripping her arm with bruising force. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you can turn people against me?" His voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "You're nothing without me." Amelia met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "Then why are you the one unraveling?" He released her as though burned. She could see it. The crack in his armor, the fear behind the arrogance. The third move was patience. Adrian, desperate to regain control, tried every tactic he knew. Gaslighting, flattery, promises of a fresh start. "I know I wasn't perfect," he murmured one night, slipping into bed beside her. "But we can fix this. For our daughter." Amelia lay still, her face turned toward the ceiling. Once, those words might have made her weep with fragile hope. Now they were nothing but smoke. "I don't need you to fix anything," she said softly, her hand resting protectively on the baby's tiny body. "We're already whole." Adrian's jaw tightened. He rolled away, seething. But Amelia wasn't. Reckless. She knew men like Adrian didn't surrender power. They clung to it with bloody fingers. To move too quickly would put her and her daughter at risk. So she documented every insult, every threat. Every time he slammed a door, grabbed her arm, spat venom into her ear. She recorded conversations with her phone hidden beneath the blanket. She snapped photos of bruises before they faded. She built her arsenal slowly, brick by brick, until she had a fortress of evidence. Adrian thought he was still the predator. But Amelia was already sharpening the blade. Weeks turned into months. The empire Adrian had built began to rot from the inside. Investors withdrew quietly, partnerships dissolved. His board questioned his leadership, their smiles strained and polite. At home, his temper grew volatile. He smashed glasses, shouted at shadows, paced like a caged animal. Yet Amelia never flinched. The calmer she became, the more unhinged he grew. And the more he spiraled, the clearer it became. Adrian wasn't just losing his company. He was losing control of the narrative. One evening, Nathan visited. He stood in Amelia's kitchen, cradling his niece, his protective eyes fixed on his sister. "You've already brought him to his knees," Nathan said quietly. "One word from you, and the Wexler name could bury him completely." "Why not finish?" Amelia watched her daughter's small fingers curl around Nathan's. Her voice was calm but firm. "Because destroying him too quickly would make me no better than him. He needs to collapse under the weight of his own choices. And when the time comes, it won't just be my word against his. It'll be undeniable." Nathan studied her, pride flickering in his gaze. "You've changed, Amelia." "No," she said, her eyes hardening. "I've remembered who I am." Adrian's breaking point came sooner than she expected. He stumbled, home one night reeking of whiskey, his shirt untucked, his hair disheveled. His hands shook as he poured himself another drink. "They're turning on me," he slurred. "The board, investors, even the press, they think I'm unstable." Amelia stood in the doorway, her daughter asleep upstairs, her arms crossed. "Maybe because you are." His glass shattered against the wall. He lurched toward her, eyes bloodshot with rage. "You think you can ruin me? You think anyone will believe you over me?" Amelia didn't move, didn't blink. Her voice was steady as stone. "They don't have to believe me. They'll believe the truth." For the first time, Adrian froze. Something in her tone, calm, certain, final, made him realize what he had lost. The control, the dominance, the fear he once commanded. It was gone. And in its place stood Amelia, no longer the fragile wife he could bend. She was a mother lion, now her claws sharpened, her resolve unbreakable. That night, after he stumbled into a drunken sleep, Amelia stood over the crib, watching her baby breathe. She brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's tiny forehead. "You'll never know the prison I lived in," she whispered. "You'll only know freedom, because I'll tear down everything that threatens you, piece by piece." Her daughter stirred softly, curling closer into the blanket. Amelia straightened, her eyes hard with promise. Adrian's empire had begun to crumble. His mask was cracking. His allies were deserting him. And this was only the beginning. The courthouse steps buzzed with cameras. Flashes popped like gunfire. Reporters shouted questions, microphones lunged forward. "Mrs. Wexler, do you believe Adrian manipulated company funds? Amelia, are you seeking full custody?" She said nothing. Her silence was sharper than any soundbite. In a navy suit tailored to power rather than prettiness, Amelia held her daughter's hand and walked inside. Nathan shadowed her like a bodyguard, his jaw set, his eyes scanning for threats. This wasn't just another hearing. This was war. Inside, the air hummed with tension. The gallery was packed. Journalists, investors, society wives who once envied her, rivals who hoped Adrian would fall. Even board members had slipped in, eager to watch their golden CEO sweat. And sweat he did. Adrian sat at the defense table, immaculate in his custom suit, but his mask was slipping. He drummed his fingers too quickly against the polished wood. His smirk didn't quite reach his eyes. He scanned the crowd, hungry for admiration, and found only hungry eyes waiting for his collapse. The judge entered, stern and steady. The gavel cracked. Case number 2319. Wexler versus Wexler. Amelia's lawyer rose, voice firm. Your Honor, today we will prove a pattern of financial fraud, emotional abuse, and reckless neglect. Conduct that makes Mr. Adrian Wexler unfit, both as a husband and as a father. Murmurs rippled through the room. Adrian shifted, smiling with practiced disdain. Baseless accusations, he muttered to his attorney, loud enough for the nearest reporters to catch. But Amelia sat still, her hands folded. She didn't need to interrupt. The storm was already building. The prosecution's case unfolded like a slow, merciless symphony. First came the bank records, hidden transfers, shell accounts, company funds funneled into Adrian's private ventures. Charts and spreadsheets projected onto the screen, a damning portrait of greed. The jury leaned forward, brows furrowed. Then came the witnesses. An assistant who confessed to being paid to shred incriminating documents. An investor who recalled Adrian's erratic behavior after the airport scandal. Each word chipped away. At his facade, Adrian's jaw clenched tighter with every testimony. His fingers, once drumming, now dug crescents into his palms. Finally, it was Amelia's turn. The bailiff swore her in. She walked to the stand, calm, almost regal. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Her lawyer asked the first question. Mrs. Wexler, can you describe your relationship with the defendant during your pregnancy? Amelia's voice was steady. I was isolated, manipulated. He withheld support, emotionally and financially. When I nearly died giving birth, he wasn't there, because a business deal mattered more. Gasps whispered through the gallery. Adrian leaned forward, sneering. That's not true. Mr. Wexler, the judge cut sharply. You will remain silent until it is your turn, Amelia continued. I documented everything, the insults, the threats, the neglect. I stayed silent for too long, but silence protects abusers, and I refuse to raise my daughter in that silence. Her words struck like iron. The lawyer presented the evidence she had so carefully built. Recordings of Adrian's venom, photos of bruises, emails dripping with contempt. And then, the video. The courtroom screens flickered to life, playing the airport footage. Adrian's mocking voice filled the chamber. You're nothing but dead weight, a burden. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in the room turned toward Adrian, watching him squirm beneath his own words. Amelia looked straight at the jury. That is who he is behind closed doors. That is the man entrusted with a company, with investors' money, with a child's future. And that is why I am here. Adrian's attorney rose quickly, voice sharp, desperate. Your Honor, this is a smear campaign orchestrated by a vindictive ex-wife. Mr. Wexler is a respected CEO. His company has generated billions, provided jobs, created value. This courtroom is being used to wage a personal vendetta. The judge's eyes flicked to Amelia. Do you wish to respond, Mrs. Wexler? She nodded once. This isn't vengeance. This is survival. I'm not just here as his wife. I'm here as a mother, protecting my child. And I'm here as a Wexler, protecting what my family built from his corruption. Her last words rang through the chamber, reverberating like a gavel strike. Even Nathan, seated behind her, felt a surge of pride at the steel in her voice. Then came Adrian's testimony. He strode to the stand, his swagger forced. "I've been painted as a monster," he began, voice dripping with charm. "But I am a businessman, a husband who provided everything, a father who only wanted the best. Amelia." He turned to her, feigning softness. She was fragile. Postpartum struggles, misunderstandings. She's weaponizing her pain against me. He flashed the jury his most dazzling smile, the one that had closed million-dollar deals. But the charm rang hollow. The prosecutor's cross-examination was swift and surgical. "Mr. Wexler, did you transfer funds into a private account in the Cayman Islands?" Adrian smirked. "That was a business strategy." "Did your board approve it?" His pause said more than any word. One by one, the lies unraveled. By the time the questioning ended, Adrian's smirk was gone, replaced by a sheen of sweat under the courtroom lights. Closing arguments burned with fire. Amelia's lawyer delivered the final blow. "Mr. Wexler believes he is untouchable. But evidence does not lie. Abuse does not vanish because a man wears a suit. Fraud does not disappear under a charming smile. Today, this court has the chance to say no one is above accountability, not even Adrian Wexler." When the jury filed out, the courtroom buzzed with electric anticipation. Amelia sat, hands folded in her lap, her face serene. Adrian shifted restlessly, whispering to his attorney, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, holding the verdict slip. "We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Amelia Wexler." The words landed like thunder. Custody, granted to Amelia. Fraud, guilty. Adrian's face crumpled, not in sorrow but in fury. He slammed his fist against the table, shouting, "This isn't over! She'll regret this!" The judge's gavel cracked. "Order, Mr. Wexler, you are in contempt!" But Amelia didn't flinch. She stood, gathering her daughter into her arms. She looked at Adrian, truly looked, and for the first time felt nothing. No fear, no longing, just freedom. Outside, cameras exploded in a frenzy. Questions rained down, but Amelia didn't answer. She simply raised her chin, her daughter nestled against her, Nathan at her side. She had entered the courthouse as a survivor. She was leaving as something greater, a woman who had reclaimed her voice, her power, her name. And Adrian, he was no longer a CEO, no longer a king. He was just a man stripped bare, his crown shattered at his feet. That night, Amelia stood at her window, the city skyline glittering before her. She whispered to her daughter, "We're free now, and tomorrow, we build something better." Her daughter stirred softly, safe in her arms. Amelia closed her eyes, her voice steady, certain. This was never about revenge. This was about rebirth. The news broke like a storm. Headlines blared across every screen. Disgraced CEO found guilty of fraud. Wexler empire crumbles amid legal fallout. Once titan of industry faces ruin. Adrian's face was everywhere, but it was no longer the polished mask of power. The camera lenses captured him pale, furious, dragged down by the weight of disgrace. Share prices plummeted. Board members resigned in droves. His name, once synonymous with ambition, had become shorthand for arrogance, greed, and failure. And, through it all, Amelia remained silent. She didn't need to speak. The world had finally seen what she had always known. Her own life had shifted into a quieter rhythm, though no less powerful. The home she chose was nothing like the cold mansions Adrian once paraded her through. It wasn't gilded with chandeliers or soulless marble. Instead, it was built of warmth, sunlit rooms where laughter could echo freely, a garden where her daughter could play barefoot, walls lined with books instead of trophies. Here, Amelia breathed. Here, she mothered without fear, without apology. Every evening, as she tucked her daughter into bed, she felt something she had nearly forgotten existed. Peace. It wasn't the absence of scars. Those lived in her still, but peace that came from surviving, from choosing herself. Nathan visited often, a steady presence who filled the house with his booming laugh and protective watchfulness. One evening, as they sat on the porch with tea cooling between them, he studied her with quiet pride. "You look like her," he said. Amelia blinked. "Like who?" "Like the girl you used to be," Nathan replied. "Before Adrian, before all the noise, except stronger, sharper. You're the version of you she never imagined she could become." For a moment, Amelia said nothing. She stared at the horizon where the sunset bled orange and gold, her daughter's small giggle carrying through the open window. Nathan's words sank deep, rooting themselves in a place she once thought barren. "I thought he'd broken me," she admitted, softly, "but all he did was wake me up." The world, however, hadn't stopped watching her. In the weeks following the verdict, whispers of Amelia Wexler, the hidden heiress, spread like wildfire. Investors who once circled Adrian now courted her, drawn by the iron composure she had displayed in court. Editorials painted her as both survivor and strategist, the woman who had dismantled an empire while cradling a child in her arms. She turned down most interviews, but the narrative built itself anyway. The heiress who rose from ashes. What surprised her was not the attention, but the reaction of strangers. At grocery stores, women touched her arm and whispered, "Thank you for standing up." At the park, mothers nodded at her with quiet solidarity. Even men who once dismissed her offered respectful distance, as if recognizing that to underestimate her now was to invite ruin. For the first time, the whispers were not pity. They were awe. Adrian, meanwhile, spiraled. Stripped of his title, he became a cautionary tale. Lawsuits piled up like rubble, creditors circled, and prison loomed. Every attempt to spin the narrative failed, because Amelia had already claimed the truth. One desperate night, he called her. "Amelia," his voice cracked through the phone. "Please. I can't lose everything. Help me. You don't know what it's like." Her hand trembled only for a moment before she hung up. She did know what it was like. He had forced her to live it, and she had no intention of returning. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Amelia built not just a home, but a future. Her inheritance became seed money for a foundation in her daughter's name, one dedicated to supporting women trapped in cycles of abuse and financial control. She hired survivors, mothers, daughters, women who needed a lifeline. Every signature she signed felt like a strike against the silence that had once suffocated her. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a journalist asked, "What do you want this foundation to stand for?" Amelia looked at her daughter in the crowd, held safe in Nathan's arms, and answered simply, "Rebirth, because every woman deserves the chance to rise." The finale of her journey came, fittingly, at an airport. She hadn't set foot in one since that day, the day Adrian humiliated her, the day her silence cracked but didn't yet shatter. For months she had avoided the memory like a wound too raw to touch. But now, with her daughter balanced on her hip, Amelia walked through the same terminal. It was almost poetic. The same polished floors, the same echoing announcements, the same smell of coffee and jet fuel. Except everything had changed. People recognized her. Some stole glances. Others whispered her name. A few even raised their phones for photos. But no one looked at her with pity. No one saw a burden. They saw a woman who had walked through fire and emerged untouchable. Amelia adjusted her daughter. Against her shoulder, her head high, her stride unbroken. A man in a suit whispered to his companion, "That's her. That's Amelia Wexler." His companion shook his head, almost reverent. "No, that's the woman who destroyed Adrian Wexler." Amelia didn't pause. She didn't correct them. She simply walked, her daughter cooing softly, the whispers following like an anthem. The gate. She paused by the window, watching planes slice through the sky. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, no longer the timid wife hiding her name, no longer the victim silenced by cruelty. She was Amelia Wexler, heiress, mother, survivor, builder. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "We're writing a new story now," she whispered, "and this time no one else gets to hold the pen." As the boarding call echoed overhead, Amelia stepped forward, not into exile, but into destiny. The heiress had risen, and she was never coming down,